Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. That Thursday afternoon, as the sun poured into the living room through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Boston apartment, I stepped inside and caught a glimpse of my family sitting on the couch. My wife, Vanessa, my mom, Eleanor, my daughters, Mia and Sophie, and my best friend, Marcus. Their expressions were serious and there was tension in the air. "What's wrong?" I asked, a sense of foreboding welling up in me. "Dad, sit down," my 17-year-old daughter Mia says, with a hardness in her voice I've never heard before. "You need to accept a new reality. You're not in control of this family anymore. Uncle Jim is more like a father to us now." Anger burns in me, they all know it. They all knew, but chose to remain silent. I left the room without a word, Vanessa calling from behind me, but I didn't turn around. In that moment, Ethan Mercer's world came crashing down. The next day, when they realized the revenge I was preparing, it was too late. I'm Ethan Mercer, 42, a senior consultant at a leading environmental consulting firm in Boston. My specialty is sustainable urban planning, which helps cities to develop in a way that is less harmful to the environment. The job requires me to analyze data, anticipate trends, and provide pragmatic solutions, traits that are deeply embedded in my personality. I have been married to my wife, Vanessa, for 18 years. We met in graduate school when she was studying art and I was studying environmental science. She was energetic and creative at the time. I was more calm and analytical. It is this complementarity that makes us attracted to each other. After college, we settled in Boston, started a family, and now we have two daughters, Mia, who is in her senior year of high school, and Sophie, who is just starting high school. Looking back on our marriage, there have been peaks and valleys. 10 years ago, I had neglected my family for a large sustainability project, causing our relationship to come close to breaking up. That crisis made me realize the importance of work-family balance. After that, I started limiting my travel time, making sure I attended my children's important events, and scheduling family days every week. Nonetheless, as the years passed, it seemed that our relationship grew into a comfortable habit rather than the passionate love that it had been. I thought it was the natural state of all long-term marriages: stable, reliable, comfortable. Until that 18th anniversary that changed everything. That day, I prepared a professional-grade painting kit for Vanessa because I knew her artistic dreams. For years, she taught part-time art classes at a community college to support her family, giving up the opportunity to become a professional artist. Whenever I saw her painting in her small studio at home, there was always a special light in her eyes, some kind of vigor that I rarely saw in everyday life. "Oh, Ethan, this is perfect," Vanessa said in surprise when she saw the gift, her eyes twinkling. She hugged me, but I felt a hint of difference. Perhaps it was my fault that her hug seemed a little less passionate than it used to be. For dinner, we chose a fine dining restaurant on the Charles River that overlooked Boston at night. Vanessa is still beautiful by candlelight, and the years have only left a few fine lines at the corners of her eyes, instead adding a mature charm. However, her eyes often drifted out the window, and her mind didn't seem to be on our conversation. "What are you thinking?" I asked, gently taking her hand on the table. "Just thinking about how fast time flies," she replied, a faint smile on her lips. 18 years. Sometimes I wonder what life would be like if we had taken different paths. I felt a pang of unease. Regret? No, not regret. She shook her head, her eyes a little misty. "Just curious. Have you never been curious about those unrealized possibilities? For example, if I had pursued an art career instead of teaching, or if we hadn't settled down so early." I pondered this for a moment, somewhat unsure of how to respond. I'm not the kind of person who dwells on assumptions very often. I guess I'm more concerned with immediate reality and future plans. Speaking of plans, there's an art exhibit at the community center next month that I think you should attend. Her eyes lit up, a reaction I haven't seen in a long time. "Really? Do you think my work is good enough?" "Of course," I said firmly, my heart secretly happy to have piqued her interest. "You're a gifted artist, Vanessa. It's time for more people to see that." On the way home from dinner, Vanessa was more animated than usual, talking about the works she wanted to show and possible themes. Seeing her so excited gave me a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time, as if I had finally found a way to touch her heartstrings again. Over the next few weeks, Vanessa devoted herself to preparing for the exhibition. She spends long hours in her little studio, sometimes even forgetting to eat. I try to adjust my work schedule as much as possible to make sure I can attend my daughter's activities and be home for dinner in the evening. I know I've missed some important family moments in the past because of work, but I've been trying to balance it out. However, as the date of the exhibition approached, I began to notice some subtle changes in Vanessa. She began to pay more attention to her appearance, got a new haircut, bought some more fashionable clothes, and even resumed using makeup she hadn't touched in a long time. These changes should have made me happy, but something in my gut tells me it's not just about the art show. Are you going to the studio again tonight? I asked as Vanessa was getting ready to leave after dinner one day. Yes, I want to finish the last painting, she replied, a hint of urgency in her tone. Don't wait up for me, it might be late. Do you need a ride? I offered to spend more time with her. No, she declined quickly. I've asked Carla to go with me, and she's preparing her own piece as well. I nodded, despite the growing sense of unease in my mind. After our many years of marriage, I've been able to pick up on her subtle expressions and changes in tone. Something's wrong, but I'm not sure what. The community center was packed on the day of the exhibit. Vanessa's work, a series of oil paintings depicting the intersection of nature and industry on the edge of the city, has attracted a lot of attention. I stood not far away and watched her interact with the audience, her face beaming with confidence and joy. In that moment, I was so proud of her and realized how much she craved that recognition and appreciation. However, it was then that a tall, well-dressed man caught my attention. He stopped in front of Vanessa's work for a long time, with genuine admiration in his eyes. When he started talking to Vanessa, I saw that special look on her face, a glow I hadn't seen on her face in a long time. This is one of the most insightful pieces of cityscape I've ever seen, he told Vanessa, his voice low and magnetic. You have captured the paradoxical nature of modern city life, both the cold steel and concrete and the unyielding vitality. It reminds me of the work of the German expressionists, but with your unique perspective. Vanessa's face beamed with joy. Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to say. I've been trying to find a way to show the city and nature in a state of coexistence, not in opposition, but in a complex symbiotic relationship. I completely understand that perspective. He agrees with a nod of his head, admiration, and some sort of emotion I can't place in his eyes. Cities should not be seen as enemies of nature, but as alternative ecosystems created by humans. Your work captures this delicate balance. Jim Harlow, he held out his hand, the owner of Harlow Art Gallery. I would like to invite you to the local Visions exhibition next month. Your perspective is exactly what we need. Vanessa's eyes lit up and she accepted the invitation almost breathlessly. It's a great honor, Mr. Harlow. I'm happy to participate. Please call me Jim, he smiled. I look forward to working with you and exploring more artistic possibilities. I stood not far away, watching the scene. Harlow looks to be in his mid-40s and wears a dark gray couture suit with an elegant and confident demeanor. His gaze locked on Vanessa with an eagerness I wasn't comfortable with. But I also saw the gleam in Vanessa's eyes, the joy of being truly understood and appreciated, and it made me both happy and a little jealous. Later in the evening, Vanessa excitedly told me the news. Jim says my work has a particular perspective. He wants to exhibit my paintings in his gallery. Can you believe it, Ethan? This is a real professional art gallery, not a community center. That's wonderful, dear, I said, genuinely happy for her, despite a twinge of unease in my heart. Harlow Gallery is very influential in the art world, and this is a great opportunity. He also said I should think about expanding the series, possibly featuring different cities, she continued, with a glint of excitement in her eyes. This may mean that I need to travel to pick up more material. Traveling? I asked, feeling a twinge of surprise. We could go together, maybe take the girls while we're on school vacation. Vanessa's smile waned slightly. Jim says artists sometimes need the space to be alone to really feel and capture the soul of a place. But we can arrange a separate family trip. I nodded my head in agreement, though the sense of unease in my mind intensified. Jim Harlow seems to have had a big influence on Vanessa's artistic career in a very short time. Over the next few weeks, Vanessa began to frequent Harlow Gallery in preparation for the exhibition. Subtle changes in her behavior began to appear: an updated closet, a new hairstyle, a more protective approach to her phone, and emotional ups and downs. Sometimes she would be beaming over a text message, and other times she would look anxious because she couldn't reply in time. Our family dinners became fewer and farther between, and she often stayed out late with her artwork. A few times I offered to go to the gallery to see her progress, but I was always pushed away with various excuses. I'm not at my best right now. Jim says it's best not to be disturbed in the creative process. I'll surprise you when the work is more mature. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, I asked, "How are the preparations for the exhibition going?" "It went well," she replied briefly, her eyes glued to her cell phone screen. "Jim has a lot of good ideas. He thought I should try some new techniques to enhance the three-dimensionality of the piece." "You seem to be mentioning Jim all the time lately." I try to sound casual. "He seems to have had a great influence on your artistic career." She looked up, a flash of defensiveness in her eyes. "He's my mentor, Ethan. He has great insight into the art world. Not everyone can understand the deeper meaning of art, but Jim can. He really understands what I'm trying to say through my work." The words stung me. For years, I've been her first audience, her first supporter. Now she's implying that I can't really understand her art, while this Jim, who came out of nowhere, can. "I just think you've changed a lot lately," I confessed. "We rarely have dinner together anymore. You're always at the art gallery." The girls noticed the change as well. "Sophie asked me yesterday if you don't like being with us anymore." "This is my career, Ethan," she said, her tone suddenly sharp. "For years, I've supported your career, and now it's your turn to support me. I thought you'd understand. Do you want me to be just a teaching housewife for the rest of my life?" "I never thought of it that way," I said, feeling a little hurt. "I've always encouraged you to pursue art. I was the one who suggested you enter the community show, remember? I just want more time with my wife." Her expression softened a bit. "It will be fine after the exhibition. This is important to me, Ethan. This may be my only chance." I nodded, choosing to believe her. But as the days went by, the canceled family plans and late nights of art making grew. So did my concerns. Once, Vanessa claimed she had to go to the art gallery to work overnight, and I offered to give her a ride, but she refused. That night, I needed to pass near the art gallery for work, and out of curiosity, I decided to see if she was actually there. The lights in the art gallery were indeed on, but instead of seeing Vanessa at work through the glass window, I saw her and Jim sitting on the couch, glasses raised and smiles wide. At that moment, some kind of terrible doubt took root in my mind. One weekend, I received a call from my mother, Eleanor, who wanted to come and visit her granddaughters. Unlike usual, she seemed particularly insistent on coming this time, even though I told her Vanessa had been busy lately. On the second day of her arrival, I noticed some strange eye contact between her and Vanessa. When Vanessa claimed to be going to the art gallery, there was a momentary look of concern on her mother's face, but it was quickly masked. When Vanessa left, I asked my mother, "What do you think of Vanessa these days?" The mother was silent for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "She seems to have found a new passion. Art means a lot to her. But not just art, right?" I asked directly. My mother looked at me with sympathy and a hint of guilt in her eyes. "Ethan, sometimes people look for different things at different stages. Marriage requires understanding and space. Maybe you guys should communicate more. You know something, don't you?" My voice gets tight. "What did you see?" "I just know you two need to talk," she replied, avoiding my direct question. "Real communication, not superficial conversation." My mother's evasiveness reinforced my conviction that she knew something I didn't. The feeling is suffocating, not only the fear of possible betrayal, but the humiliation of being kept in the dark. A few days later, I noticed Sophie had become unusually quiet. As the most emotional child in our family, she is usually lively and outgoing, ready to share her thoughts and feelings. But lately she hardly talks, just stares at her plate in silence during meals, and her grades have started to slip. "What's wrong, honey?" One night, when we were alone, I asked her, "You seem to have something on your mind lately." She shook her head, but tears were already in her eyes. "You can tell me anything," I assured, taking her hand gently in mine. "Whatever it is, we can face it together." "I can't," she choked out. "It's going to hurt you, Dad." My heart sank, and some dreadful foreboding seized me. "Is it about Mom?" She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "What did you see?" I asked softly, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I went to see my mom at the art gallery last week to surprise her," she said, her voice almost inaudible. The back door is unlocked. I saw her and Uncle Jim. They're kissing. Not just any kiss, Dad. It's like one of those movies. I left immediately, but I know they didn't see me. Even though I already suspected it, hearing it confirmed in person was still like a hammer blow. I hugged Sophie and felt her thin body tremble in my arms. It's not your fault, honey, I reassured her. It's definitely not your fault. You don't need to feel guilty about seeing things or telling me. Will you leave us? She asked, fear in her voice. I've seen on TV that when this happens, families break up. Never, I said firmly. No matter what happens, I will never leave you and Mia. This is my promise to you. I could hardly sleep that night. All sorts of emotions rage, sadness, betrayal, confusion tossed around in my mind. I had thought that our marriage, while less passionate, possessed a deeper level of connection and commitment. Now, I'm not sure that was just wishful thinking on my part. Over the next few days, I began to gather more information. Through a chance conversation with another exhibiting artist, I learned that Jim Harlow has a reputation for mentoring married women artists, especially those seeking recognition in the midst of a midlife crisis. It's not simply career coaching, but a model he uses his influence in the art world and his deep understanding of art to give these women the recognition and understanding they crave, and then builds intimacy at their most vulnerable moments. Don't get me wrong, he does have an eye. The artist told me, unaware that she was talking to the victim's husband. He can spot real talent, but he also has specific flavors. Mature married women are usually those who feel tied down by life and family. He gives them a sense of liberation, a sense of being understood and appreciated. This information made me feel even more angry and hurt. Vanessa isn't just cheating. She may also be the victim of an elaborate pattern, although she herself may not see it that way. I went alone to Vanessa's gallery opening night. She claimed to want her own spotlight. While there, I witnessed the obvious chemistry between her and Jim, the overtouched fingers, the private whispers, and that familiar, in-love glow. Though they keep a proper distance in public, for a man who has known his wife for 10 years, those subtle interactions speak volumes. Jim introduces Vanessa to visitors with an exclusive pride and intimacy in his voice. I am honored to introduce you to an artist with a truly unique perspective. Vanessa Mercer's work demonstrates a rare sensitivity and insight into the beauty that ordinary people overlook. This talent cannot be taught. It can only be discovered and nurtured. And Vanessa, my wife, looked at him with a gleam of adoration and love in her eyes. In that moment, I felt a mixture of sharp pain and determination. I couldn't fool myself anymore. Vanessa didn't go home that night, saying she was celebrating with her art friends. I didn't question it. I just said yes calmly. By then, I was already thinking about how I was going to cope with it all. The next morning, I received a text message sent to me by mistake. It should have been sent to Ethan M., the name of my contact on her cell phone, but instead went to Eleanor M., my mother, because of the similar name, and was then forwarded to me by my mother, probably out of guilt or in the hope of prompting us to communicate. It was from the mother. I understand your feelings for Jim, but please consider what this means for the girls. They need stability and honesty. Mia is already suspicious. I felt a wave of vertigo. It wasn't just Vanessa's betrayal, but the fact that my mother, one of the people I trusted the most, knew but chose to remain silent. What shocked me even more was that the text message implied that Mia, my oldest daughter, might know something too. I dialed my buddy Marcus's number. Marcus is a friend from my college days and is now a digital security expert. We have remained in close contact, although we have seen less of each other in recent years due to our respective work and family responsibilities. I need your help, I tell him, my voice awfully calm. It's about Vanessa. We met at a cafe far from the gathering area of our mutual friends. There, I confessed everything to Marcus, my suspicions, Sophie's sightings, my mother's text messages, and my observations on the opening night of the gallery. I'm sorry, man, Marcus said, sympathy in his eyes. That's too bad. What are you going to do? Direct confrontation? No. I shook my head, feeling something inside me slowly cooling and solidifying. Confrontation only leads to more lies or temporary remorse. I need to know the whole truth, not just about her and Jim, but who knew about it and who chose to keep quiet. Marcus nodded, thoughtfully. You want proof? Yes. But I'm going to get it legally, I emphasized. No hacking, no private investigators, nothing that could be used against me legally. I explained my idea to Marcus using legitimate public resources and observations to gather evidence. Not by hacking into Vanessa's cell phone or computer that's illegal, but by open observation and digital traces. Photographs of public events at the gallery, credit card records showing gifts and hotel stays, and testimonials from gallery staff. Are you sure you want to go this way? Marcus asked, looking at me worriedly. Once you start, there's no turning back. What you find out could be worse than you think. And even if all the evidence is gathered, then what? How do you plan to use them? They've made their choice, I replied, feeling a coldness inside. Now it's my turn. I needed to know who was involved in this deception and who chose to protect her rather than tell me the truth. Then I'll make everyone face their own choices and behaviors. That night, I asked my mother out for coffee and asked her directly, "How long have you known about Vanessa and Jim?" Her face turned pale. "Ethan, tell me the truth, Mom," I insisted. "I have a right to know. I had my suspicions months ago," she finally admitted, apology in her eyes. Vanessa starts mentioning this Jim frequently. Not quite normal. Then one time, I was picking Sophie up from school and stopped by the art gallery and saw them in the cafe. The way they interact, not like a normal tutor and student. But I hope that's just a passing fascination that will pass. I don't want to get involved in your marriage. Who else knows? I asked. She hesitated. Mia was using Vanessa's laptop for homework last month when she came across some information. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but she was frustrated and came to me to talk about it. I told her not to jump to conclusions, not to tell you. I wanted to give Vanessa a chance to work this out for herself. I felt a sharp pain. My oldest daughter, my pride and joy, was caught up in this deception. I used to think there were no secrets between us, but now I realize she chose to hide them from me too. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked, pain in my voice. Why does everyone choose to protect her? Neither of us want to hurt you, she said, reaching out to touch my hand. But I ducked. This kind of thing is complicated, Ethan. People make bad choices in their marriages, but that doesn't have to mean the end. I want to give Vanessa a chance to end the relationship on her own and rededicate herself to her family. Keeping quiet is hurting me, I replied. You all chose to protect her instead of telling me the truth. This isn't just about her betrayal. It's about the deception of all of you. When I got home that night, I looked at my sleeping daughters and made a decision in my mind. It's not just about Vanessa's betrayal. It's about everyone's deception. They both need to face the truth and the consequences. I began systematically gathering information the nights Vanessa claimed to have worked at the art gallery, the restaurant and hotel purchases shown on credit card records, the photos and comments on social media. I even bumped into an employee at the gallery, and through natural conversation learned that Jim and Vanessa often spent time alone after closing, sometimes having dinner at a nearby hotel. Each message was like a knife, stabbing deep into my heart. But I forced myself to continue, systematically and calmly collecting each piece of the puzzle. Not for self-abuse, but for the full truth. It was at that moment that I began to plan my response. Not an impulsive outburst, but a well-planned revelation. Everyone involved in this betrayal will face the mirror of truth, including Vanessa, Jim, my mother, and even my daughters. I contacted Marcus again and explained my plans in detail. He tried to dissuade me. This will only hurt more people, including yourself and the girls. Maybe there are other solutions. There is no other way anymore, I replied calmly. Lies have poisoned our families. Only the truth will allow each person to face the consequences of their choices and actions. Marcus sighed when he realized he couldn't change my resolve. Promise me at least one thing. Think it over before you execute the plan. There are some words once spoken, some actions once committed, that cannot be taken back. I nodded in agreement, but my mind was already made up. As I always say in my environmental consulting work, sometimes there has to be destruction before there can be true restoration. Old structures must give way to new, healthier systems. And in this case, our marriage and family relationships are that system that needs to be rebuilt. Back on that fateful Thursday afternoon, when I walked in the door and saw them all sitting there, Vanessa, my mother, Mia, Sophie, and Marcus, I knew it was time. They had apparently planned some sort of intervention to try to stop me before I could carry out my plan. Perhaps Marcus betrayed my trust, Or perhaps mother guessed my intentions. But that's no longer relevant. Dad, sit down, Mia said, with a coldness in her eyes I'd never seen before. You need to accept a new reality. You're not in control of this family anymore. Uncle Jim is more like a father to us now. I felt a wave of vertigo when I heard those words. Not just because she acknowledged Jim's role, but because she chose to take his side. My oldest daughter, the child I have always loved and protected, now openly supports the man who destroyed our family. Anger burns in me, they all know it. I left the room without a word, Vanessa calling from behind me, but I didn't turn around. I stepped out of my apartment and took a deep breath of the early spring air, feeling a strange sense of calm. Because I know that my plan is up and running. That very morning, I activated the first phase of my revenge plan. Anonymously provide information about Jim Harlow, his pattern of pursuing married artists, to multiple art critics and gallery owners, with verifiable evidence, legally obtained through public records and interviews with former trainees. I had spent weeks carefully contacting several female artists who had worked with Jim. Initially, neither of them wanted to talk about it. But when I shared my own situation not as an angry husband, but as someone seeking understanding, several of them began to open up. As it turns out, Jim has a pattern. Select talented but under-recognized married female artists, build intimacy through artistic recognition and understanding, and then get out quickly to find his next target when the relationship gets complicated or the person's family gets involved. He's very good at making you feel special and the only one who really understands, a former trainee told me. Then, when you've sacrificed everything for him, family, honor, self-respect, he disappears, leaving you there, broken and alone. These testimonies, along with photos and timelines from public appearances, form a disturbing picture. Jim Harlow is not a mentor who truly cares about the arts, but rather a manipulator who is adept at using art as a medium to fulfill his own needs. In the meantime, I prepared a comprehensive digital presentation detailing the timeline of the affair, including public photographs, credit card records showing gifts and hotel stays, and testimonies from gallery employees. This is all legally obtained information, no hacking, no privacy violations, just careful observation and publicly available information. Rather than opting for direct confrontation, I arranged for this information to be presented simultaneously to the school board where Vanessa teaches, the arts council that funds Jim's gallery, and several influential clients and patrons. These organizations have a right to know the true character and behavioral patterns of the people they fund and support. I stood on a bench in the Boston Public Garden and watched the setting sunlight spill over the old buildings. This city has seen the ups and downs of countless lives, and now it will see the end of my marriage and the beginning of a new one. The phone vibrated. It was a text message from Marcus. The information has all been submitted. Ready to deal with the consequences? I didn't reply. No one is really prepared to deal with the consequences of betrayal, neither the perpetrator nor the victim. But I've made my choice and now have to meet the storm. That night, instead of going home, I checked into a downtown hotel. I needed space to think and for them to feel my absence as if they had left me alone with the truth. The next morning, the storm arrived as expected. Vanessa receives a call from the university informing her that she has been suspended from teaching pending an investigation into a morality clause issue. At the same time, Jim's gallery lost a major grant, and several artists withdrew their work. Discussions about Jim's special mentoring style began to circulate on social media, with some former mints openly sharing their experiences. When I got home, Vanessa was pacing back and forth in the living room, her face pale. Her cell phone kept ringing with notifications, apparently from various inquiries and speculative messages. Mother sat on the couch with a serious expression. Mia stood by the window with anger in her eyes, and Sophie cowered in the corner as if trying to be transparent. "What did you do?" Vanessa questioned, her voice trembling. "I'm just letting the truth come out," I replied calmly. "Just like that intervention you guys planned. You ruined my career," she shouted, tears and anger shining in her eyes. "The school is investigating me. The art world is talking about it." "No, Vanessa." I shook my head, my voice calm and firm. "It was your own choices that ruined it. I'm just making sure everyone knows those options. You chose to betray me and our marriage. And it's not just you, Dash." I look around the room, my eyes landing on my mother and Mia. but those who knew but chose to remain silent. You don't understand. Vanessa's voice softened with a hint of pleading. It's not that simple. Me and Jim. He understands me in a way you've never understood. Then why don't you just tell me? I'll ask, why lie to me and keep me in the dark like a fool when everyone else knows the truth? I don't want to hurt you, she whispered. And this is your solution? Getting everyone together to defend this lie? Even our daughter. Sophie rushed into the room, tears streaking her face. Why? Why are you doing this? Why can't we be like we used to be? Her words were not directed at me or Vanessa, but at both of us, at the family we had destroyed together. I'm sorry you got caught up in this, I said to Sophie. But sometimes the truth is more important than a comfortable lie. The truth. Mia stood in the doorway, anger in her voice. You say that like you're some kind of justice monger. You're just being vindictive, Dad. You're just as selfish as Mom. Her words were like a sharp blade piercing my heart. In my planning, I never considered a key factor: my daughters might hate both of us. I thought that exposing the truth would bring clarity to things, would make responsibility clear, but the reality is far more complicated than I imagined. Yes, I'm taking revenge, I admitted, feeling a twinge of shame. But it is also a search for truth. Everyone should be responsible for their own choices, including myself. The mother tries to mediate. This isn't going to solve anything, Ethan. Revenge will only bring more pain. So what do you suggest, Mom? I asked, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. Keep pretending everything's fine? Continue to live a lie? Like you suggested me to do? A heavy silence fell over the room. Everyone is weighed down by the weight of their choices and behaviors. The next few days threw our family into chaos. Vanessa tries to contact Jim for support, but he has begun to distance himself. The scandals in the art world put a great deal of pressure on him, and his main concern became protecting his reputation and career. A few days later, Jim disappeared completely. He is said to have dumped Vanessa immediately after the scandal erupted and is already pursuing another promising artist. This news does not seem to surprise me. I've long known his pattern from other victims. As soon as a relationship gets complicated or could jeopardize his reputation, he gets out fast. Vanessa tries to reconcile, claiming that Jim manipulated her and that she has realized her mistake. He made me feel special, Ethan, she sobbed. He understands my art. He understands my soul. But now I realize it was just his game. I'm really sorry. When I showed her the evidence, Jim's text messages with another artist immediately after he left, and his use of virtually identical compliments and promises to other trainees, she broke down. You spied on me? She asked, incredulity in her voice. No, I explained. This information comes from public sources. Social media, photos in public, and people willing to tell the truth. You are not as cautious as you think you are. And Jim has a pattern. He uses the same strategy with every special artist. In that moment, I saw something in Vanessa's eyes break. Maybe it was her fantasy of her so-called great love. Maybe it was her trust in Jim, or maybe it was just her confidence in her ability to deceive. Whatever it was, that brokenness made her vulnerable and real, more real than any time in the last few months. Nonetheless, too much damage has been done, too much trust has been broken. I started the divorce process, not out of impulse, but as a well-thought-out decision. There was no way to get our marriage back to what it once was, not only because of the betrayal, but because of all the lies and deception that surrounded it. When the divorce proceedings began, I surprised everyone by not using infidelity as leverage, including my attorney, who had been advising me to take advantage. I don't want to win that way, I explained in front of my lawyer. It is enough that the truth is known. I just want a fair solution, especially for the girls. But privately, the truth is far from simple. I did want Vanessa and Jim to pay for their betrayal, which is exactly what happened. What I didn't anticipate was that my vengeance also came at a great cost: the trust and happiness of my daughters. Sophie refuses to talk to her mother and blames it all on her betrayal. And Mia, despite having sided with Jim before, now suffers from public humiliation and blames it on both of us. She keeps referring to the fact that you could have resolved these matters in private, as if betrayal and deception are trivial matters that can be resolved quietly. The conversation is no longer about family, but about visitation rights, child support, and property division. Cold legal terms that fail to capture the warmth and love we once shared. We sit in lawyers' offices and discuss, like strangers, what was once at the center of our lives. Why did it end like this? Vanessa asked me after one of the sessions with sadness in her eyes. We used to have so much. It's your choice, Vanessa, I replied, but with less bitterness and more exhaustion in my tone. You chose Jim. You chose the lie. Not all my choice, she said softly. You're in on it. For years you were always so sure, so confident you knew what was best for me and what was best for the family. You rarely really ask me what I think or feel. When Jim showed up, he made me feel seen and heard. Her words stung me because there was a hint of truth in them. I always thought I was a good husband providing stability, supporting her career, and being involved in family life. But perhaps, in some ways, I did overlook her deeper needs and desires. It's not a defense of her betrayal, but it offers an understanding. A month later, I moved into an apartment in Boston's South End. The empty room is filled with cardboard boxes, and pictures of my daughters hang on the walls, memorabilia of happier times that seem so far away now. Adjusting to living alone is not easy. Sometimes, waking up late at night, I would automatically reach out to touch Vanessa where she should be, only to find a cold, empty bed. Sometimes I'll be preparing dinner and suddenly realize that no one will be there to share it. Loneliness is huge, but I'm starting to learn how to live with it. Work became my safe haven. I threw myself into a new sustainable urban planning project in an attempt to find success and fulfillment professionally that I couldn't find in my personal life. But even at work, that lingering sense of failure hits me from time to time. If I can't sustain my marriage, how can I claim to know how to build sustainable communities? The daughters take turns visiting, although these visits are often filled with awkwardness and unspoken words. Mia remained at arm's length, seemingly unable to forgive me for my vengeful ways. Sophie, on the other hand, is more open, but also carries with her a new kind of apprehension and maturity that a child her age shouldn't have to assume. How's Mom doing? Once, when Sophie came to spend the night, I asked. It's okay, I guess, she replied, her eyes fixed on her dinner plate. She got a new job at a small cafe. She said she needed time to think and figure out what she wanted. I nodded, my mind a mix of emotions. Even though Vanessa hurt me, she is still the mother of my daughters, and I don't want her to completely fall apart. What about you and Mia? How's school? It was okay, she shrugged. Everyone is talking about. What happened? Some people are mean, but my friends are on my side. Mia is a little harder because she's about to graduate and everyone knows about her. It made me feel a pang of guilt. My plan for revenge did cost Jim and Vanessa, but it also put the innocent daughters through public humiliation. Would things have been different if I had chosen to address the issue in a more personal way? After the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected visitor, Jim Harlow. He looks haggard, his reputation in the art world is in tatters, and the gallery is about to close. He stood in my doorway, his demeanor no longer confident, but hunched over his shoulders, his eyes flickering. You got what you wanted, he said, standing in my doorway, bitterness in his voice. You ruined us. You made your own choices, I replied, my voice calm. Choices always have consequences. Vanessa really loved you, you know? He said, as if trying to sting me. But you're too focused on your job, your plan for a perfect life. What she needs is passion, to be seen. And you happen to always have that for married women, right? I countered. What a coincidence. It seems like you have a list, talented but unrecognized women with frustrated careers and flat married lives. You're not looking for artists, Jim, you're looking for prey. A flicker of shame flashed across his face, but was quickly replaced by resentment. At least I made her feel alive. When was the last time you actually looked at her and listened to her? Not as your wife, not as the mother of your children, but as someone with her own dreams and fears. His words hit a soft spot in me, because there was indeed a grain of truth in them. During our marriage, I probably did see Vanessa as part of my life plan, rather than an individual with her own needs and dreams. It's not a defense of your behavior, I finally said. Taking advantage of someone's vulnerability doesn't become right by pointing out their partner's flaws. When he left, I realized that even though I had won in a way, there was no real winner in this fight. Vanessa lost her teaching position and her reputation in the art world. Jim's gallery closed, and his career was ruined. My family was torn apart, and my daughters lost the stability of the world they once trusted. One Friday evening, I received a call from Sophie, who carefully asked if she could visit. It was the first time she'd reached out to me in 6 weeks. Of course, dear. I agreed immediately, a glimmer of hope welling up in my heart. She came with a backpack containing textbooks and overnight clothes. We made dinner together, simple pasta, like she used to prepare for me when I'd come home from working late. There was a comfort in the silence, as if we were all adjusting to this new normal. Daddy, she said suddenly as we were washing the dishes, Mommy is sorry. She cries every day. I stopped what I was doing and didn't know how to respond. It wasn't because of Jim, Sophie continued. She said she realized what a mistake she'd made, not by cheating, although that was a mistake too, but by getting us all involved. She said she never wanted to hurt me or Mia. I nodded in silence, feeling the expectations and burdens embedded in Sophie's words. I'm not saying you should forgive her, Sophie added, with a maturity in her voice beyond her years. But maybe, can we try to fix something? For me and Mia? Some broken things can't be fixed, Sophie, I whispered. But I promise I'll do everything I can to make sure that you and Mia don't get hurt anymore by this. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Mia misses you too. She just, too stubborn to admit it. She feels you could have handled it better, less publicly, less destructive. But she still loves you. That night, while Sophie slept in the guest room, I sat on the balcony and looked out over Boston at night. The lights of the city twinkle like stars, and behind each light is a family, a story. I'm reminded of what Vanessa said on our anniversary about the unrealized possibilities. Now I realize that there are some paths that once chosen, there is no turning back. A few weeks later, I learned that Jim had left Boston to try to make a fresh start in Chicago. But his reputation had spread across the country. No artist wanted to work with him. No investor wanted to take a chance. His pattern of mentoring finally cost him. As for Vanessa, she started working at a small cafe, away from the art scene. According to Sophie, she is attending counseling to try to understand her behavior and choices. She said she needed to learn to stand alone and not rely on the approval of others to define her worth, Sophie relayed. This sounds like some kind of progress, though I'm not sure I should care. And I, despite seemingly winning the battle to outsiders, found myself standing alone on the ruins of my victory. My plan for revenge was executed perfectly, but at a cost far beyond my expectations. One day, as I was cleaning up my office, I found an old photo of the four of us together on vacation in Maine, smiling and happy. Mia and Sophie were small then, and Vanessa and I stood behind them, arms draped over each other's shoulders, with the kind of easy smiles on our faces that only really happy people have. I can't help but wonder if things would be different now if I had chosen a different path: private resolution, an attempt at understanding and forgiveness, rather than public revelation and revenge. Or earlier, if I had paid more attention to Vanessa's emotional needs and really seen her dreams and fears as an individual, would our marriage have taken a different path? But this kind of thinking is pointless. As I told Jim, choices always have consequences. Vanessa and Jim chose betrayal and deceit. I chose revelation and revenge. And now we are all paying the price for our respective choices. A few months later, at Mia's high school graduation, Vanessa and I sat in the same public place for the first time, separated by an empty seat. We were both proud of our daughters, but that shared sense of accomplishment no longer bridged the gap between us. When Mia ran toward us after the ceremony, she hugged me and then turned to her mother. "Thank you all," she said, with a new firmness and maturity in her voice. "I know this has been a tough time for all of us, but I want you to know that I still love you both, despite everything that's happened." At that moment, I felt tears well up in my eyes. Despite all the betrayal and anger, my daughter was able to find the strength to love. Maybe that's the real victory, not the satisfaction of revenge, not the reckoning of right and wrong, but the ability to rebuild from the rubble. Later that night, Vanessa stopped me in the parking lot. She looked changed, not just outwardly, but with a certain inner calm and determination. "I wanted to thank you," she said, surprising me. "Not for your revenge, that was cruel, though perhaps deserved, but for your support of the girls. They need you, Ethan, more than I thought." I didn't know how to respond, except to nod. "I'm so sorry," she continued, tears in her eyes. "Not just for Jim, but for all the lies, for getting everyone involved. I should have been more honest, with you, with myself." "Why?" I finally asked, a question that has been bothering me for a long time. Why Jim? She thought about it for a moment and seemed to be genuinely searching for an honest answer rather than a convenient excuse. He makes me feel seen, she finally said, not just as a wife or mother, but as someone with her own dreams and fears. He understands my art, or at least pretends to. But more importantly, he asked questions and really listened to me. And you and I, we haven't really talked in a long time. Her words both stung and relieved me finally getting an honest answer. I should have been more attentive, I admit it. I thought providing stability and support would be enough. I also should have been more direct about my needs, she responded. Instead, look for external recognition. This conversation didn't miraculously fix our broken relationship, but it provided an understanding, a perspective we didn't have before. In the end, no one really benefits from betrayal. Momentary passions and revenge may bring fleeting fulfillment, but the cracks they leave in the fabric of life can never be fully repaired. When the light of truth illuminates the shadow of deception, it often burns the bonds that connect us as well. Years later, as I look back on this experience, I realize that the real lesson is not in the pain of betrayal or the emptiness of revenge, but in the weight of each choice and our responsibility to each other. Marriage is more than a promise. It is a decision to choose each other anew every day, to choose to see, hear, and value each other as whole people, not just a role in the scheme of our lives. Revenge may bring justice, but it will not bring peace. This is the price of betrayal, not just borne by the betrayer, but by everyone involved. And perhaps true courage lies not in exposing the lies, but in the ability to move on in the face of the truth with scars, but also with wisdom and hope. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.